We use Red cameras.
Nice.
And a lot of things that we do, especially on the MKBHD channel.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Well, somewhere.
Out of somewhere. But kind of out of nowhere. Red gets acquired by Nikon. I'm just going to keep saying it both ways every time because people say both.
Can't upset anyone that way.
Yeah. What could go wrong? No, so I've never used a Nikon camera. Actually, that's not true. I've used a couple, but I've never shot mainly on any channel with Nikon. I always used to rag on Austin Evans because he shot on Nikon cameras for a while. We'd go to CES and he'd be the only one using a Nikon camera.
And you all picked on him?
Yeah. We were like, you're still using it? What is this camera? Why are you using this one? And he loved it and he was familiar with it and it was great. But like he eventually switched and there's just not that many Nikon video cameras out there. So to an extent, I see why Nikon is getting into the high-end cinematography space with Red.
Yeah.
But there is also some history to Nikon and Red, isn't there?
There is.
You want to get into that?
Sure. Yeah. So there was a lawsuit that has been going on since 2022. In my opinion, one of the stupidest lawsuits of all time.
It's like a petty lawsuit.
Yeah.
Dumber than... No, the McDonald's hot coffee. I sidetracked that.
No, that's real.
That's
real.
legit. Just kidding. Keep going.
Yeah,
This one's closer to real.
Yeah.
Sure.
So for a very long period of time, people have been trying to shoot compressed internal RAW on their cameras, which basically means like if you took a RAW photo versus a JPEG, it's compressing it slightly, but it's still RAW, so it's storing a ton of dynamic range and all this information, color information, so it's super flexible in post. Now, normally when you shoot video, you have the option of like H.264, H.265, which are compression algorithms, which basically take intra-frame compression. It's this whole thing. But over time, a lot of camera companies have been trying to figure out ways to basically like up the quality of their video. So apparently, RAW has had a patent on compressed internal RAW video.
Nikon's had a patent on it.
Red.
Red.
Red had.
yeah.
You said raw had.
Red had.
Red hat.
Red had. Okay.
Red had raw.
Yeah.
Yeah, Red patented compressed raw internal recording.
Okay.
Yes, so that no other video camera could do compressed internal raw recording.
Yeah. And I remember this because I remember when the Nikon Z7 and Z6 came out, or Z9. Yeah, Z7 and Z6 came out like a number of years ago. They didn't have it, but if you used an Atomos Ninja, which is like this external monitor that is also a recorder that goes on top of your camera, you could record raw.
Yeah.
And so I was always like, I wonder why they're doing that. Like it must be a buffer speed thing or something like that. Turns out it was just because of this lawsuit. Yeah. So when the Z9 came out, which is Nikon's like highest end, super fast camera that doesn't even have a shutter, I think. It's just like all just like reading. Yeah.
It's the noise it makes. Wait, do you remember that Sony camera with the like boost button and we found out it had artificial sound? Now that's I'm imagining
just you hold the sound down and it just goes reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So the Z9 came out in 2022, I think, and it had internal compressed RAW built in. And Nikon was just like, yeah, we think that is a stupid patent that should never even have been granted. And I think at this point they were just like, we are going to like take this on, and if you sue us, then maybe we can get your patent removed because it's stupid in general. And I agree. Like I think you should not be able to patent something like that because then you're just controlling the entire camera market.
Too broad.
It also feels, and maybe you can explain this better, but there's already raw photos, which does not have a patent on it, I presume.
Yeah.
So like all you're doing is taking the new version of, it's just doing raw on something else. So So I guess is there patent
It's
on
the idea of compressed RAW.
Yeah, compressed specifically. So you could do, because uncompressed RAW is gigantic and ridiculous anyway, but they had all these compression ratios, and so I'm sure they wanted to just patent that, but they ended up patenting something so broad that it just applied to all compressed RAW.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we used to shoot, like, remember the ratios would be like 5-1 or 10-1 or 22-1. Now they've simplified it to just LQ, MQ, HQ.
Okay.
Those are the compression ratios of how lossy is the RAW. It's kind of a weird way of saying it.
So they essentially just tried to compress their compression, or sorry,
they applied their compression
patent to their compression, but it just covered compressed RAW completely,
which is super
dumb. Okay,
in my opinion.
that makes sense. But it wasn't just like Red's like, we did it first. No one else gets to do
Also,
it at all.
compressed RAW is a little bit of an oxymoron.
It sounds like it.
Because the whole point of RAW, but I assume what they're doing is like in RAW photos, at least, if you have completely uncompressed RAW, it's taking like everything that the sensor is capturing, most of which our human eyes cannot even perceive. It's like frequencies of light that we can't even see, all this like redundant information. So compressed RAW is pretty much like the HQ in Red is like everything up to the stuff that doesn't matter at all.
Okay.
So it's still huge amounts of data, except for a
question.
little bit of stuff.
So is it just a different codec, basically?
Codec?
Or not codec, like format?
What,
like how when
RAW?
you would compress a picture, a raw photo to like a JPEG. They're compressing a raw video into whatever they made. That's their Red thing.
Yeah.
And that's what they tried to patent.
Yeah,
but they patented,
the idea.
The whole idea. It's like if you patented, like if you had a special fishing rod that had a certain mechanism to catch more fish, and then you just patented good fishing rod. It's like, okay, you did have a cool idea there, but like that's too broad. And now anyone else who has that a similar but slightly different good idea can't use it.
It sounds like they just took two things that were already things and when put them together and they were like, we did this. They were the first people to Google search compressed RAW, so no one had searched it and then tried to
What
patent
they
it.
should have been able to patent is the specific compression algorithm that they were using for Red RAW.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what they should have been granted a patent for. But
And R3Ds are dope, and I love them.
yeah,
I was going to say, is that specifically Red's fault, or is that just like the patent
that's the
office
patent
not having
office's
any
fault.
idea? Okay.
I think it's.
I'm sure Red wasn't upset about it, but
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sure Red tried their luck. It's like when what was that YouTube group that like tried to patent the idea? Of they tried to patent the word React.
No, I think that was a
Fine
trademark.
Bros. The Fine
Fine
Bros.
Bros,
tried
yeah.
to trademark or patent.
Oh, was it?
yeah?
I think
that was
They
a
tried to
trademark.
trademark
Yeah.
reactions.
Yeah, React.
React.
With the word React.
So that you couldn't make a YouTube video without paying them.
You couldn't make a video with like. You couldn't make a. They had this whole series that was
Reacting
Reacts.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they wanted to just like own that. And they figured that the best way to do that was to make sure other YouTubers couldn't do it. And boy, did that go well.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
went super well.
Sony tried to get the trademark on Let's Play like way back in the day.
Just not good.
So dumb.
Don't do that, guys.
So okay, so back to the story. So Red was suing Nikon in 2022 over Nikon was suing Red in 2022 over this really stupid patent. And then randomly in April of 2023, last year, I remember this happening. Randomly, they just dropped the lawsuit. And they didn't disclose why they dropped the lawsuit. So yesterday when I was doing research on this, I was reading a bunch of articles from when they dropped the lawsuit, and everyone was like, yeah, they probably settled some like internal thing that like they came to some agreement.
Well, they did.
And I'm like, oh. So then this news comes out of nowhere on, I think, Monday morning that Nikon had just...
This was Thursday because we had finished
Thursday.
editing the
Right.
podcast and everyone was expecting it last
Right.
week, but you were already in Japan and we
Thursday.
had...
Yeah. So that Nikon has just acquired Red, which seems insane to me because Nikon, theoretically, everyone has kind of been like, Nikon's on their deathbed for like years.
Yeah.
Because the Z6 and Z7 and Z8 and Z9, as good of cameras as they are, they're just not very popular. And almost every camera manufacturer actually doesn't make most of their money from their like consumer cameras, to be
Sales.
fair. Like Fujifilm makes almost all of its money from medical devices. And then of their consumer cameras, like 80% of their margin is Instax, which is the like little instant film cameras.
Wow.
So they make almost no money from actual consumer digital cameras. And I assume Nikon is similar. But I don't know specifically what categories Nikon makes all their money. Either way, it seems pretty crazy because Red is like a very well-known camera company in the industry.
But they're also super niche as well. Like I'm assuming their sales numbers, I don't know what their profit margins are, but like neither of those seem like companies that are selling.
Red is the
Tons of
underdog
cameras.
in the cinema industry. They have to like consistently kind of like showcase like these movies are shot on Red. I promise these movies are shot on Red.
Yeah. Yeah. And whenever I always like that you can see like what cameras certain films or award-winning movies are shot on.
Yeah.
And Red sneaks in there. Like lots of RE, lots of Canon, but there's a bunch that are
There's a
shot
lot
on
of
Red.
Red.
So they make it known. And Red does have this reputation at this point. I think when people hear Red camera, they think, oh, expensive cinema camera, Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, I know Red.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're out there. They strike me as like well known, but like the Lotus of camera manufacturers. Like, you know who they are, but you realize they really don't actually sell that many cameras, even though they're used by a bunch of studios.
Yeah.
So I'm not shocked that Nikon has the money or whatever to acquire them. They haven't detailed how much it was for or any of the terms or whatever, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Whenever I see something like this, I wonder, what are they going to do now that they own it? Are they going to change a bunch of stuff? Are we going to have Nikon logos on the rest of the Red cameras that come out from here on out? Like, what is happening?
They're
Are they going to
subsidiary, so I don't think they're going to change anything.
Yeah.
continue to operate like fully independently?
I
maybe?
would guess that possibly Nikon or Red probably was like, yeah, we're going to lose this lawsuit and we should just take a deal or something like that. Something that I've always noticed is if you go on like Red's Shot on Red page, all the movies that have been shot on Red generally have like really, really heavy color grading, like very, very intense color grading. And I don't know if that's just like there's a reason that people shoot on Red because they want to be able to color grade like that, but that's just something I always notice. Versus like Ari. Ari's usually a little more like subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that I shoot on Red because the color science is so good.
It's so good.
It's
so
good.
stupidly good.
Now
Like,
some Nikons might have that.
Honestly, that would be nice. That would be really nice because we shoot Canon for a lot of the same reasons, like good color science, easy, good autofocus. If we had suddenly had a bunch of Nikon cameras that like had Red level color science, I'd be pretty happy.
The most annoying thing about Nikon is that their mount and their focus and zoom are
the
all
opposite.
backwards
Yeah.
from everyone else.
Something about that strikes me also as lawsuit related.
I think it's just petty.
You think?
Yeah, because like every other camera manufacturer just does the same direction as Canon.
Like mounting lenses is always this. It's like slightly different for every mount. Like Canon is like 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then like RF mount is 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Nikon is like a different direction.
Yeah.
It's just they're all slightly different.
Is PL an open standard?
I don't know.
Because it's kind of just locking it
I feel
in.
like
It must be open because it's not really a mount.
yeah. I don't know who would own it,
Yeah.
but yeah, a lot of people make PL glass. So
Yeah. Anyway, I should have brought my Nikon. I did buy my first Red camera while I was in Japan.
Okay.
I bought a Nikon FM2 titanium because I love titanium. So
sick.
anyway,
Film.
yeah, it's film.
Of course, it's film.
Yeah.
Of course,
it's
it's
check.
Of course, it's film.
Do you think they're gonna
Duh.
still be so against the patent now that they own it?
Nope.
I hope not, because Nikon was aggressively arguing that Red should have never even have been granted the patent. And so if they turned around, bought Red, and then started enforcing it on other people, it would be the dumbest
That would
thing
be
ever.
hilarious.
I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah,
That's the greatest business decision.
especially if you were just saying they're not doing that great. That sounds like a great way to.
That's like politics, where you like debate the person over and over, and then by the end you're like, I endorse this person to be the president. That's exactly how it goes.
They're the
I
worst
wouldn't be
person I've
shocked.
ever met. They're terrible for democracy, but you need to vote for
Yeah,
them.
vote for them now. Yeah, well, we'll see how Red operates. I'm very curious. If we get better Nikon cameras, that's a win. If we get better Red cameras somehow, that's also a win.
Yeah, I don't think the Red logo or anything is gonna have Nikon on it, but I guess you would worry if the biggest worry would be if Red stuff starts declining in quality.
Yeah.
Because like Nikon starts
Margins or
taking over a
something.
little more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we love random tech takeovers, of course.
Yeah, we're Nikon boys now.
Yeah, we're Nikon boys now.
Well, not in the pod. We're Canon boys in the pod.
That's true.
That is really funny. Like this clip. Like this clip. You thought this was a part of the podcast, but it's not. It's the outro. It's the part where you like this clip.
Look at me. We're the outro now. Subscribe.